Following contains spoilers for Octopath Traveler. Viewer discretion is advised.
Video games, despite being a relatively new medium, is just another form of entertainment. However, it would be short-sighted to claim that entertainment simply exists as a mean to distract or amuse. Just like movies, television, and novels, video games provide a different way to present a story. And, after all, stories can be interpreted as just another way to pass on information and learn more about our world. Now, there are many video games where the story is not the emphasis. You have your Call of Duties, your Fortnites, and that is okay. Video games can and probably will always have a place outside of narrative. But touch back on what people consider classics. Your Ocarina of Times, your Chrono Triggers, your Final Fantasies. These games age well, not because of their mechanics, although these games did revolutionize gameplay in a big way, but because of their stories. Despite some story elements not aging gracefully, and despite some well-known tropes, these stories we continue to carry with us because they resonate in our hearts.
And that is the main reason why I think Octopath has succeeded.
Before continuing, I just want to give a brief thank you to my Patreon supporters. You're the reason I can keep doing this. Supporting the channel helps immensely. The link is in the description if you want to, but of course this is completely optional.
You can also help support the channel by liking this video and sharing it with your friends.
Octopath Traveler succeeds in its storytelling because of when it has come out. And I'm not simply citing the nostalgia trend that we've been riding on for the past 15 years or so. Although let's be honest, that doesn't hurt. Octopath Traveler has designed a game that doesn't attempt to emulate its predecessors, but rather strives to invoke the same feelings that these games originally gave us. The sprite work, in my opinion, is most clearly still done by hand, but it looks like the grown-up version of the art that I loved and tried to create as a child. It's as though I'm looking at one of those challenges where the artist redraws an old piece from years ago with their current skill level. The amount of love that not only the sprites, but the environment has received is so very clear in its detail. One anecdote, which I think very clearly embodies this concept, is about the water of the game.
Dance, water, dance!
Originally, the water was done in pixel art as well, but the person working on it did not like it no matter how he reworked it. So he just changed the style. The reason I say that this exemplifies the love put into this game is that they did not try to make a feature fit if it did not work. That is to say, they were willing to change what did not work to make a more beautiful piece. It seems that they took this approach with everything they did in the game. Although there are many game mechanics that are inspired by other games, they were not afraid to make changes to improve or leave out more antiquated ideas. They did not let nostalgia trump their creative vision, and I think that's what separates this from, say, the clumsy remake of Secret of Mana. I played the first few hours of Secret of Mana, not having played the original, and I did enjoy it. It put me in mind of A Link to the Past, both in a good way and a bad way. A good way because it was entertaining, but a bad way because despite its updated graphics, it felt as though I was playing a game as old as A Link to the Past. Which would make sense since A Link to the Past was released in Japan in 1991 and Secret of Mana was released in 1993. But I more so want to emphasize that although Secret of Mana was remade in 2018, it felt like the developers were too scared to make adjustments to the game with the 25 years of experience they've had since the release. Also, it is way less unnerving to watch sprites talk than these unmoving mouths.
Be quiet, stupid! If the Elder finds us here, we're done for.
Where Secret of Mana tried to emulate exactly, Octopath sought to emulate only that which worked. And that works better when playing to nostalgia.
See, our memories are far from perfect. The entertainment we consume in childhood, we look at from how it makes us feel, not objectively. I mean, looking back on it, I liked Full House and,
This is Kelly, Gia, and Lisa, the guys. That's funny. You don't look like guys to me.
Not only that, but when every game released at the time was privy to those faults, due to it being a young medium, we could excuse the faults because they were just intrinsically part of the experience. That does not mean that that which could be improved on need not be touched, and Octopath understood that. Now, there were some complaints about your party in Octopath being subjected to the Pokemon Center treatment. That is to say, you have to go to the tavern to switch your party members. And some grinding, but honestly, the grind factor in this game is such a minimum in comparison to many JRPGs I've played. I think the combat system feels very intuitive, and you have a lot of wiggle room around which characters to use. Obviously, characters have certain base stats that make them more inclined to be physical, elemental, or support, but you can easily play suboptimally with your favorite characters and still have a great time. I do wish there were harder difficulty settings, but there is plenty of challenge, especially for those new to this style of turn-based RPG. And some of the best of this game comes out in its side stuff. The dungeons are not anything spectacular, but there's a little bit of dopamine boost every time you find a hidden chest that requires you walking back and forth, analyzing the landscape. The side quests and NPCs have great little narratives that do not seem like much at first, but have a lot of depth and lend to the world building of this game. Now, the biggest complaint I have seen story-wise has been the characters are cliché, and that there's no overarching plot or drive behind these 8 characters. The story seems to be discrete entities, and they're simply traveling together out of convenience. There are small vignettes between the party members if they're in the party at the right time throughout the chapters and in the tavern, but otherwise the characters are not involved in each other's stories. Now, I do not dismiss these complaints, but I am of the belief that these complaints are actually what make the game so strong, especially given the current climate of things in the world. It is true that a lot of characters are cliches, but I think this is done for 2 reasons. One, this is a nod back to the original games it borrows from. Especially when video games were a new genre, they leaned back on cliches of old stories. Again, like Persona, they take these cliches as a beginning point. It is an easy way of coding, of getting something across to the audience easily. We identify with tropes because of the fact they come up so often. It is a universal starting point. However, again like Persona, Octopath does not seek to stay within these cliches. If you pay attention, both age and gender norms are put into question in this game. Take Ophelia. She's a cleric, and although she has the potential of being very naive, she's also very wise, which is shown throughout the game. And it is also emphasized that she's very young, but at the age of 20. Our youngest character, both in age and how she acts, is Tressa, and she's 18. There are NPCs where there are mothers who are 23 and young women who haven't left home who are 23. Not only that, but we see more feminine male characters such as Elfin and more masculine female characters such as Honnet, and not only are they not pigeonholed into these traits, but they're just as strong as the other characters. Some characters are cartoon levels of evil, but other characters are troubled. Those troubled characters, such as Ophelia's sister, Liana, and Elfin's acquaintance and colleague, Ogun, are not presented to be judged. Rather, we see how they judge their own actions and themselves, and why they did what they did. And our role is simply to observe and not judge.
And that is very important. There's a study that looks at the correlation between reading the Harry Potter series and compassion.
A research group led by Loris Fazali from the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia conducted several studies about the impact of reading certain Harry Potter passages and how it impacted prejudices. The research implied that it had a positive impact on the populations that underwent the study. It is hypothesized that reading has a very strong impact on how we view other people, as it requires us to put ourselves in another's shoes. We do not have control over how the story plays out, but rather the story asks us to observe and hopefully relate. Although we relate to it, it is not a story about ourselves. This ability to see from another's perspective is not an ability that is innate. It is a skill that requires practice, so we're able to do it more easily and instinctually. Octopath's story is much closer to interactive novel than RPG. If you want to check out the study, the link is in the description below. Now, I do not want to get too much into individual stories in this video. I will be doing more character analysis videos in the future. But it is important to note that throughout NPC interaction, side quests, and completing all 32 chapters, you are able to piece together a much bigger story that is occurring in Orstera. Many events happen 10 to 15 years before this game takes place, but none of the characters are directly knowledgeable about this overarching plot. You'll hear the name drops, you'll start putting things together in a timeline, but there's no one character who sits you down and says, "Listen, this is a story all about how Orstera got turned upside down." There are horrible, evil things happening, but what is that to a young traveling merchant? What is that to a young woman set on avenging a loved one she'll never see again? What is that to a thief stealing to survive or a war veteran trying to find purpose after the fall of his kingdom? These are small stories in the grand scheme of Orstera, but it reminds us of humanity.
It is so easy, especially right now, to lose yourself in these bigger events and forget to live.
How do you have compassion for yourself in comparison to those being shot and killed? In comparison to governments who do not care? In comparison to those families being separated and watching humanity make the same mistakes over and over and over? It is easy to lose yourself to the big wide world and forget to care about your own little world. Now, that is not to say to ignore the big picture, but it seeks to remind us of something. In Octopath Traveler, you pick one traveler as your main character. As far as I know, you do not get anything extra from making a certain character your main, other than the fact they are locked in your party until you beat the game, and the credits roll after you complete their Chapter 4. But it's important that you are picking your own main character because, in the same way, we are all our own main characters in our own worlds. Our struggles are not lesser, our motives are not less worthy. Even the small paragraphs of information about the NPCs in town give us the impression that they are going through their own stories as well. In life, we do not have one boss to reckon with. We have those we meet along the way, those that correspond with our own goals, and those we want to support. But we all have our own stories, and it is those stories that add up to a world. Even if you lack the ability to make one big impact, you're able to help those you encounter by trying to understand the world they see, regardless if you agree or not. And maybe through understanding that, you're able to take on one final boss. And it is only through this ability of seeing the world through another's eyes are we able to fully understand the weight and sanctity of another's life, of helping one another, of respecting a person regardless of who they are and where they come from. It is only through this that we can lessen the loss of lives through violence. It is only through compassion that we can prevent those from resorting to pain. It is only through listening that we can understand that helping others is a commodity far greater and more in demand than ever before. Like Ophelia, we can listen and understand without judgment. Like Cyrus, we can seek to educate those who do not understand yet. Like Tressa, we can share our treasure with those who need it most rather than trying to profit. Like Ulbrich, we can seek life purpose and the ability to forgive. Like Primrose, we can remain strong in our convictions and have faith in ourselves. Like Elfin, we can demand that those who are in need of care will receive healing, and remember that we are not gods. Like Therion, we can learn to trust despite the possibility of betrayal. Like Honnet, we can take care of our loved ones and keep balance in our world. And those stories, although told countless times before, are repeated because their repetition is warranted. Octopath Traveler may have been advertised for its nostalgia, but it succeeds because we are in a time where we need these stories. We need understanding and compassion, and it doesn't take 4K rendered graphics to get across the message of love, acceptance, and listening. The characters are not perfect, but there's still plenty to learn from them.
I want to end this video with a quote that I think exemplifies the entire game, but it is from Cyrus's Chapter 4, so if you don't want to be spoiled on that, you can go back, play the game, come back when you've finished the game and see what quote I was talking about. But that being said, there's not a lot of plot points in this quote, so it's up to you how much you want to be spoiled, if you want to turn this video off now, or if you want to continue.
The pursuit of knowledge is a journey with no destination. As long as people live, there is always something to learn. And so we learn, we record, we speak. Points connect, thus forming our history, our agency, our identity. This world we live in is not for or of any one individual, and neither is knowledge. And so I write and speak of all that I learned, to plant seeds of knowledge that will be harvested by those who follow me. To you who have found my writings, read well these words, that they may help you build a bridge to a brighter future.